Welcome to episode 5 of Anime Figure Archive. I'm Senpai, and today we are taking a look at a figure that I bought when it first came out back in August 2014. This is Ryuko Matoi, the Senketsu version from Kill la Kill. This was created by FAT, which stands for Pretty Hot and Tempting, and is a 1/8 scale, and originally had an MSRP of 8,250 yen. This was subsequently re-released for about 1,000 yen more at 9,210 yen back in January 2018. And crazy enough, it's getting a re-release this year in June 2025 for 16,800 yen. I don't even think I can name a figure that's been released 3 times. And even still, this has always been a grail and is currently sold out again for the June pre-orders. There is one inherent kind of problem with this figure that I'll talk about in artistry. And I wanted to review this figure for you today because I felt like it was an appropriate time to do so. Now let's go ahead and address the elephant in the room, which is price. Exchange rate at the time is very important to discuss. When this was 8,250 yen back in August 2014, if you were paying in USD, it was the equivalent of $81.40. 3.5 years later, when they released it in January 2018 and increased the price to 9,210 yen, it was still fundamentally the same if you bought in USD because it converts to $81.67. Now let's fast forward 7 years later, where the current price of 16,800 yen is over double the original MSRP. At the time of filming this video in March 2025, that converts to $112. And in this current post-COVID market, I feel like 16,800 yen is still a fair price for what you're getting. And especially because right now on Amiyami, if you want to get her pre-owned, even for B grade, she's 24,000 yen with the re-release around the corner. For those interested, there is a matching Satsuki that came out 5 months later in January 2015. Unfortunately, I did not buy her when she released, and now she's up to 52,000 yen in the pre-owned market. This is because FAT has never done a re-release of Satsuki. Back to Ryuko, there are a couple of pieces that I won't be showing you on video. And MFC user J Impact gives us a good look of the accessories. You can see the decapitation mode blade along with an additional hand to hold that as a dual wield design. And to the left, you can see a clear support piece. That support is for her left knee, but you can see you can swap it out with a stone piece to delete it. Then this picture from Hobby Search gives you a good look at what that support looks like. In the 11 years I've owned her, I've never displayed her with that support, and she hasn't sagged. If we flip back and forth, you can see she's at the same angle. Now, what has happened in the 11 years that I've owned her is that this foot has become broken off of the peg. Reason being, there's just a lot of tension from her legs that you have to kind of separate and press down, and eventually that tension just kind of snapped. So I do have it re-glued in place. And I do want to go ahead and point this out if you happen to see it on video. There is damage to the tip of this scissor blade. Reason being, I left this out last night, right, in preparation for this review, and my cat got a hold of it, so that's very unfortunate. But if you do see those edges, it's because of a cat and not from a defect from when I bought this. The paint as a whole is very impressive, particularly for a 1/8 scale. They've done a good job of adding shading on almost every aspect of this figure. And given all the dark colors, that's pretty difficult to do, and I think they executed it well. Although her hair is dark, they've done a great job of getting her shading on almost every single strand of hair that you can see, which is something you don't even see on many modern scales. The line work on her legs is impressively clean, especially given the scale of this figure. And once again, even though the clothes are dark, we still have black airbrushing throughout. We're greeted with that same dark shading on the fabric of the skirt itself, but unfortunately we see some rough areas here on these kind of spikes or teeth-looking things on Senketsu. They definitely had to be hand-painted back in, and some of them do look a little sloppy. The vented area on the back of Senketsu is both very impressive and disappointing. The details on the back side of these wings that have the arms look really good. The fine line work is absolutely insane. But surprisingly, we don't have any shading on the vent here. This would have looked really good with just a simple dark wash. Here's another great angle to demonstrate all that really clean and impressive line work where you can see it coming down her arm and particularly in her glove. It's just a shame that you can so easily see kind of the sloppy areas on Senketsu's skirt. And unlike many female figures, she does have shading on the skin. We see some here on her side boob, the side of her thigh, and on her mid-waist. And believe it or not, an area that we do not see shading on that kind of surprises me is the scissor blade itself. Any shadows you see here is due to modeling. Given the level of shading throughout the rest of the figure, I would go out on a limb and say that this was an artistic choice. In the anime, the scissor blade is always really bright red and stands out kind of against the crowd in the background, so I think they've just chosen it to make it as gloss red as they possibly could. And adding black airbrushing would artificially take away from this level of gloss. She does have the iconic red highlights on the back of her hair. This angle allows you to see the really clean red line work, as well as the red on the underside of her gloves, once again, extremely clean. But the sharp points of Senketsu really just stand out at many of these angles. Then lastly, this angle gives us a good look at her eye decals, which are set extremely nicely. We can see red highlights in her hair again. Her mouth does have a little bit of pink painted on the inside. And we can see Senketsu's eyeball right here, which is hand painted and unfortunately just a tad sloppy. This is one of the best 1/8 scale paint jobs in our entire collection. But it's still hard to get past some of Senketsu's teeth looking really sloppy around the edge of the skirt because you see that from every angle of the figure. And relative to some of our scales, she wouldn't be a 5 out of 5, so I'm going to give her a 4 out of 5. The sculpt overall is extremely detailed and they've done a fantastic job, especially at this 1/8 scale. But there are a few areas of concern. Unfortunately, there are multiple part lines in her hair, such as here, here, and the worst being down this whole side here. And then an area on her skirt that's annoying once you notice it is this right here. This is supposed to be at least 2 teeth of Senketsu, but for some reason they just almost didn't take out that middle triangle and it just ends up being this odd rectangle. It definitely breaks up the flow of the teeth on the skirt, and this is not a defect. This appears on other people's as well. But moving beyond my kind of nitpicking areas of quality, the sculpt overall is fantastic, particularly for a figure of this scale and was made back in 2014. It's definitely going to get a 5 out of 5. And when it comes to the base, at this point it feels like FAT is just kind of showing off the best of their modeling and paint. The seam right here on the piece that's removable for the clear support, you can barely see the seam there, and you definitely don't notice it from the front, so it's a very impressive job regarding fitment. They've also made this as compact as it can be. You can see her feet are literally extended to the outer diameter of the circle. And the paint, shadows, and textures are very believable. The stone is visually appealing, and I think the color palette looks really great against the black and red of Senketsu. And overall, I'm just very pleased for what we get here. It's not going to be as elaborate as an E-string base, but definitely deserving of a 4 out of 5. And now we finally reach artistry, which is one of the best aspects of this figure, but also its Achilles heel. As far as I can tell, this is not based off an artwork, but it so clearly captures so much energy that Kill la Kill has in the anime. I can just hear Don't Lose Your Way playing in the background. It really feels like it's pulled straight out of the anime and still keeps that eroticism that Kill la Kill has always had. They've managed to capture just so much movement and energy. Just the way her arm, for example, pulls all the way back and kind of follows through the length of the blade back here. All the movement in the skirt that shows you that she kind of just landed and is ready to jump forward and launch towards the enemy. But this artistry also creates a very particular drawback to this figure. And that's that this figure only displays well if you're able to look at it at eye level. The camera is extremely low to achieve this shot. If you're not looking at this perspective, you miss that glare in her eyes. You miss all this movement that's being drawn this way. And unfortunately, if you're above it, it's not particularly flattering because you end up seeing something like this. This height I'm showing you at right now is very similar to what it looks like when I'm looking at her from the second shelf on a Detolf. So not even that low. You can see from even just slightly above, all I see is kind of the top of her head. And all this detail that's up under here, and all that twisting motion, that energy that her face gives off, is hidden. Now I'm only 5'9", but to enjoy and appreciate this angle without crouching, I have to set her on top of a Detolf outside of protection, which is just something to keep in mind if you plan on displaying this figure in your collection. Where are you going to place her such that you can appreciate and enjoy this? And lastly, for displayability, you do have to keep in mind the blade. Now, I only see this as a problem if you're trying to butt this up against glass, because of course this would be the closest point you can get to the edge. But because it's pulled so far back in the figure, it's very easy to set a full-size scale right beside it in the same plane without it interrupting anything. But it is something to keep in mind. But even with the displayability issues that this pose and everything creates, I can't get past how much energy that is created and captured here in what they've designed, so I have to give it a 5 out of 5. For value, let's go back to 2014 where it cost 8,250 yen. It was only 81 USD, and I do think it is an appropriate value. It's something I would give a 4 out of 5. 3.5 years later, it re-releases for 9,200 yen, but still costs us 81 USD, still a very good value. But now it's more than doubled to 16,800 yen in June 2025. But as stated earlier, that's only 112 US dollars, which I still assert is a fantastic value for this figure and something that I'd give a 4 out of 5. But let's step back for a moment and appreciate what this has done on the secondhand market. Even with the re-release around the corner, she's still commanding a 24,000 yen price tag. So you can imagine how expensive she got before the first re-release, and then what she did before this third re-release. And even though we're on the third reiteration, she's still sold out everywhere. So I think at any point in time, if you were able to get her at MSRP, she's a complete 5 out of 5 on value. For me, this has been a great episode of AFA because I get to relive and analyze a figure from 11 years ago. And to still be awe-inspired by that is a pretty special thing. And in particular, Kill la Kill means a lot to me. Whenever I first kind of became an adult, right, was out of college on my own, I have very fond memories of watching Kill la Kill as it came out with my roommates. It just has such a great mix of animation style, whimsy, comedy, incredible action. Some of the most hype scenes you could ever get behind. When Don't Lose Your Way comes on, just you can feel that adrenaline pumping. Then on top of all that action, energy, and great music, you also have this kind of erotic element to all of Kill la Kill. So it's just a series that I have great fond memories of. Seeing this figure allowed me to kind of relive those, so it definitely gets the Scissor Me Timbers Award. I hope you enjoyed this episode of AFA. I really enjoyed getting to see something in my collection that I haven't really thought about in 11 years. Definitely makes me want to listen to the soundtrack, and hope this is useful for anyone that's considering getting their hands on it in June. If you want this figure but don't have it pre-ordered, for a site like AmiAmi where you're allowed to cancel a pre-order the month prior before your build, definitely check out the end of May to see if anyone cancels their pre-orders and you can snag one. Other than that, monitor a week or two after releases because some people might not pay for their order and it goes back up for sale. If this is a grail for you, best of luck in your hunt. But who knows, we might get a fourth re-release given the popularity of this figure. I hope this video was insightful. Subscribe if you enjoy this kind of content. Take care.